Yesterday when I got home, I had a calf that was out here just huffing and puffing real bad, and I was taking a look at her. And last night I thought there's a chance that she might be dead this morning. I thought that there's a chance that there may she may die in the next couple of days. But and so I gave her a shot of antibiotics, and then I put her in the separation space. And this is just one of those things that I've been talking about. For whatever reason, these little calves, and it turns out that she was just very, very, very hot. And I don't know why these calves, you would think that, if you were sitting outside and it was getting so hot that you were legitimately gonna die. I mean, you would think that you would just go and drink some water, or like go in the shade, right? I mean, you would think. But I mean, and this is also, one of those things. This is why the big feed yard people, they won't buy the small little calves, especially if they're not weaned. They won't buy the small little calves when it gets blazing hot outside. I'm not entirely sure why, but these calves, they legitimately just sit out in the open. Even like when they're burning up so bad that they're gonna drop dead, they're about to drop dead. I mean, they will still just sit out there in the open. And so I'm not entirely sure why they do that, but they do. And I have a second calf that looks like she's burning up real bad, and so I put her in the barn too, and I put them in front of a fan, and they got a shade cover, and they're both looking a lot better. All right, they're both looking a lot better. They're both looking like they're doing just fine, and I'm not entirely sure why that happens, but the calves do that. All right, this is very important to. I think, and this is also, the reason why these big feed yard people, they won't buy the tiny little calves when it gets blazing hot outside. I don't know exactly why, but the animals will legitimately just sit out in the open. Like, they could be burning up to a point where they're legitimately going to drop dead, and they will just still lay there in the open. They won't go to the shade. They won't go get a drink of water, no nothing. These big animals, they don't do that. These big animals, if it gets scorching hot outside, they go into the shade, right? They go into the water. They go drink water, right? But for whatever reason, the small little calves, I don't know if it's because they have difficulty regulating their body temperature. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that. And I actually, I know that one of the signs of heating up real bad is if you get real hot, you'll actually start to feel cold. And so I'm not exactly sure if maybe that's happening. Maybe the calves are sitting out in the sun for too long, and then they're actually feeling cold, and so they sit out in the sun for longer and they don't drink anything. I don't know what's going on, but these little calves, they do that. All right, and this is also why the big feed yard people, they don't buy the tiny little calves when it gets blazing hot outside, and especially not the unweaned calves. All right. And so, with everything that I got going on right now, here is exactly what I will be doing. Here is exactly what I will be doing. This is the plan. This is the bigger, broader idea for what I will accomplish over the next few months. And these are the exact objectives that need to be met. All right. Like me, when I talk about these things, when I discuss these ideas, I give a very clear cut, this is exactly what needs to happen over the next few months. All right. And so this is exactly what needs to happen over the next few months. I will be selling 15 and I will buy 20. All right. I will be selling 15 and I will buy 20. And I will be liquidating probably at about 750, because the heifers, I will liquidate them closer to 650, 700. And the steers, I will liquidate them closer to 800. So I'll be liquidating at about 7.25, 750. I will be selling 15 and I will buy 20. All right. So that will grow my business by 5% a month. I'm actually going to reduce the amount of growth that I am looking to achieve in my business to about 5% a month. And the reason that I will do that is because if I sell 15 and I buy 20, that grows my herd by 5, and that leaves me with about $10,000 to $12,000. All right, that will leave me with about $10,000 to $12,000 cash. What I will do with the money is I will pay out the dividend, buy whatever else it is that I need, and I will also just make sure that my growth objectives are met. If I lose an animal, I have capital to replace the animal. And with the leftover money, I would anticipate that it's about $7,000 a month that gets left over. $7,000, $8,000. I will deleverage myself with the money. So I will expand my business by 5% a month and reduce the amount of leverage on my balance sheet. I would anticipate that within about 3 to 4 months, and this is just this is a very kind of just a conservative goal. All right, this is not like a, I'm gonna go for maximum burn. All right, this is like a, I'm just gonna do this. And okay, so here's the big idea. When I do that, I will effectively end up here within about 4 or 5 months. I will end up in a situation where I have 60 cattle and I have, under like 20% debt. My debt load will be under 20%. It might, it'll be under like 30%, because, it's like at the end of the month, and it's like if I legitimately feel like I can run more cattle, my whole big, bottleneck with the situation right now is, it's a lot going on. Okay, there's a lot going on. If I the whole big idea is I will buy 10 animals a month. All right, I will buy 10 animals a month. I will sell 15 and I will buy 20. And so if I sell 15 and I buy 20, that will leave me with about $10,000, but after I pay out the dividend and after I buy everything that I need, it will leave me with about $7,000 to $8,000. And with that capital, I can make sure that my growth objectives are met. I can make sure that my herd is growing by 5 animals a month. And I can also, my herd is growing by 5 animals every 2 months. But, as I compound it forward, right, as I move forward, the size of my herd will grow. And instead of selling 10 animals, or instead of selling 15 animals every 2 months, I'll start selling 10 animals every month, right? And instead of selling 10 animals every month, I will start selling 20 animals every month, right? As I move forward, my earnings will compound, and that will be with zero leverage. I will be looking to take leverage before the end of the year, okay? I will be looking to take leverage before the end of the year. I am looking to take leverage before the end of the year. And so I believe that I will end this year with somewhere around 120 cattle. If things go very well, maybe I end up, maybe about 100 and 150. If things just go according to plan, like, these are not ridiculous things, right? This is not some ridiculous plan. This is not some like, I'm about to go on a magical journey and throw a Hail Mary into the middle of nowhere. You can take a look at my cattle. I've chosen these cattle. I buy my cattle by myself. All right. When I go to the sale barn and I buy animals, I legitimately handpick these animals one at a time. All right, and I buy commodity animals at commodity prices, and I raise them to a commercial standard. So when I liquidate, I effectively get commodity prices for my animals. All right. And so, when I sell my 15, I will probably, and I buy 20, it will probably leave me with about 10,000 cash. I will pay out my dividend. I will, buy everything else it is that I need. And I would anticipate that I have about $7,000 left over. And my herd has grown by 5%. All right, my herd will have grown by 5 animals. And I will do all of this with zero leverage. I will actually be reducing my leverage from both ends. I will be expanding the size of my balance sheet and paying off my debt at the same time. And I can do this without any, I'm not going to be using any debt. By the end of the year, I will be looking to take leverage, okay? And when I do this, I believe that I will end the year with about 120, something like that. Realistically, it'll be between 120, 150, something like that. All right, because, here's the thing. If I have zero debt, all right, if I have zero debt and I have assets, right? If I have zero debt and I have assets, and I have decided to leverage against my assets, right? I talk about this, you can do this with anything. If you have land, you can go to the bank and you can take a loan against your land. If you have stocks, you can go to the bank and take a loan against your stocks. You can do this with anything. All right, I will be taking loans against my cattle. All right, my cattle are a pristine asset. All right, I was talking about this yesterday. A majority of my cattle are a pristine asset, okay, over 90%. And so when I take a look at this, I would be willing to utilize my cattle, as a source of equity to leverage against. I would be willing to do it. All right. And, at the end of the day, the leverage gives me tax benefits, and it increases the number of assets that I appreciate at the same time. All right. And so if I have zero debt and I have 60 cattle, if I have zero debt and I have 60 cattle, how many cattle do you think I would take a loan for, right? How many cattle do you think I would take a loan for? If I have 70 cattle and I have zero debt, how many cattle do you think I would take a loan for, right? I would take a loan for 70. Granted that the 70 cattle that I have are pristine, right? Good assets, and they have been stabilized, and they have gone up in value during that time period that they were being stabilized. And I would be, and I was talking about this yesterday, and the whole thing, I don't think I will have any issues going to $2 million a year. I don't think so. All right, I'm actually, I actually think that, my income will go past $1 million very fast. All right, my income is gonna, and here's the thing. And and the whole thing about assets, like me, I don't have income. All right, income is like this arbitrary thing that, it's like this. My income is zero. All right, my income is zero. Like when you take a look at Elon Musk, if you look up Elon Musk net worth, and he has a $400 billion net worth, he's not sitting there with $400 billion in a checking account, right? And this is also why I say you can't tax rich people. If you tax rich people, if you require that rich people pay taxes, if you 100% require that rich people pay taxes on the money that they create, if you required that, America would turn into a third world country overnight. And here is a very realistic example of this. And and in terms of my perspective, I've already, I talk about my perspective on money, but I'll go over it with the whole idea of Elon Musk. Elon Musk is not sitting around with $400 billion in a checking account, okay? Elon Musk has an equity stake in Tesla. All right, Elon Musk has an equity stake in his various companies, and when you take the value of that equity stake, it is about $400 billion. So if we require that Elon Musk pay a if we required that people like Elon Musk required them to pay a 10% tax and said, you're gonna have to fork up $40 billion right now cash. All right, you're gonna have to pay taxes, you're gonna have to pay $40 billion cash. It would collapse his companies. All right, his companies would be obliterated. All right, it would destroy his companies. That's why you cannot tax rich people. It's the same thing with me. Like, and it's the same thing with every other, rich/wealthy person, effectively. Granted that, you made money, doing, reasonable things, right? You didn't do some malicious thing to make money, right? You cannot tax people, or you cannot tax rich people. It's, it would legitimately collapse the entire economy because, and I talked about this, I don't have any money. I have assets, right? I pay myself whatever I need. That's it. All right, I have assets. I don't have any money. All right, I have assets. Same thing with Elon Musk. Elon Musk does not have $400 billion sitting in a checking account. All right, he has stock in his companies. He has a rocket ship. I mean, he has all of these various assets, right? He has a car company. He has satellites in the atmosphere giving internet to people, right? I mean, he's got these various assets and these various businesses, and the dollar value of his businesses is about $400 billion. And it's the same thing with me. And, I've talked about my money, my whole situation about money. And I've actually sat there and I thought about this, and I was like, well, my business will probably make about, I've actually entered a situation where, my business this year will probably make, I'm thinking maybe about 400 grand. I'll make about 400 grand. And the reason that my earnings has shrank, the reason that my earnings has gone down is because I have intentionally reduced the size of my balance sheet, and I legitimately sat here for a month and a half and did nothing but collect money. That legitimately but it still put me in the range of what I thought I was going to make. I said I believe that I will make about 350 to 500,000, and I reasonably anticipate that I'll make about 400 grand this year. All right, and I would reasonably anticipate that my income goes past $1 million very quickly. But I don't have any income. All right, I don't have any income. I have assets. All right, and if I legitimately need money, I can even just take a loan against my assets. All right, it doesn't matter. Or I can pay myself some money and then I can use the capital. All right. And but the whole thing about like the amount of money that I make, I don't even really think about it because I don't worry about money. I am legitimately not concerned about money at all. 0%. I don't have any income. If I legitimately need money, I can pay myself the money, or I can put it on a credit card and pay for it at the end of the month. It doesn't matter, okay? I don't have any income. I have zero income. I have a business. I have assets. I have land. All right, I don't have any income. My income is zero. All right. In terms of like in terms of the amount of money that I generate, and this is, and this is the same thing with anybody else. If you have a business, if you create a business, if I create a business, if anybody in America creates a business and the business is profitable, then that business has a dollar evaluation, and that dollar evaluation is a multiple of the earnings. You take a look at how much profit does this business make, and then you multiply it. And if the future outlook of the business, it looks good, right? The owner of the business has clearly indicated that the business is growing. And when you take a look at the revenue of the business, the number has increased over the several years or whatever. The number, the amount of money that the business is making has gone up every single year for the last 3 years. And the owner of the business is clearly indicating his plans and is saying, and like me, when I give you what I am looking to accomplish over the next 5 months, I will probably end up doing better than I thought. Because at the end of the day, if I legitimately feel like just taking the money and buying more cattle with it, I can. All right, I will have cash reserves at the end of every month. After I pay out my dividend, after I've grown my herd by 5%, and after I've bought everything that I need, I will still probably have, $7,000-8,000 left over, and that amount of money is increasing. All right, the amount of money that I make goes up. All right, the amount of money that I'm making is going up very fast. And so when you take a look at the whole situation, what would be a reasonable multiple, and the amount of money that I make is going to be about 400 grand. That is what I reasonably believe that my business will make this year. So in this situation, what would be the multiple of my business? Probably somewhere between 15 and 20. But I've already said that my business, I don't sell my business. Because at the end of the day, if anybody was going to try and buy my business, farming is not something that you can just start doing. Nobody cares, all right? You're not going to be able to do it. All right, farming is not something you just buy into. Oh my God, I just bought a farming business and now I'm a farmer. You're going to lose all your money. The only reason anybody would be looking to buy my business is to buy me, and I don't sell me. I don't need your money. I don't need any money from anybody. I legitimately don't need anything from anybody. I don't care about your deal. Take your deal and, hold on to it real tight and throw yourself into a hole. I don't care. I don't need money from anybody. If I had nothing, I could redo everything in 30 seconds by myself. All right. I don't need money from anybody. All right. But when you take a look at how much my business makes, and you take a reasonable multiple for the amount of money that I make, I probably generated somewhere between about $7 million in the last 3 years. All right, my income is and a majority of that happened in the last year and a half. So my income is probably, like, if you were to take a look at me and you were to take a look at the amount of money that I generated for myself over the last year and a half, and it's like, and let's say that we take a conservative estimate, and let's just say that let's just say I generated $5 million and I was required to pay $500,000 in taxes. Could I do that? Absolutely, I could. Right, I could. Right, I don't care about $500,000. I don't, but at the end of the day, if I was gonna do that, I don't have any money. Right, I only have assets. And if that were the case, is the IRS going to give me a loan? Right, who's going to appraise everything that I have, and then are you going to give me a loan? Because I don't have any income. I don't have anything. I created this business out of nothing. That's why I made such a large amount of money, right? I made such a large amount of money because I create these businesses out of nothing. And it's like, if you were to require that I pay $500,000 in taxes, could I do it? Sure, I could. And, I probably, the IRS probably wouldn't even have, I would just go and take a loan against my assets and I could pay it. But at the end of the day, is that legitimately a good idea? Do you think that that's a good idea? All right, and it's like, if that's the case, if my business does poorly, right? Let's say, let's just say whatever, Elon Musk, he had $500 billion, and then, over the course of 2 years, the stock in his company went bad. The stock in his company did poorly, and now he has $450 billion. So he lost $50 billion, in the course of 2 years. Are we going to give him a refund? Right? If my business does poorly, are you going to give me a refund? Right? Are you going to give me some of my money back? I mean, are the taxpayers going to chip in to make sure that my business doesn't do poorly? Is that the idea? Because because it cannot just be we tax rich people. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. All right, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous idea to have a required tax. And it's like, if I were to pay taxes on the money that I created, why would I want to create any more money, right? I wouldn't. Right? It would be, why would I, if I had to risk paying 10% of everything that I created, if I had to risk 10% in taxes, why would I grow my business? Right? Why would I grow my business? Oh my God, if I grow my business to 10 times the amount of money that it's making right now, I'm going to have to pay $5 million in taxes. Then why would I grow my business? And if I don't grow my business, you have to understand, like, when you watch me running cattle, right? I mean, I legitimately feed people. All right? I feed, I produce tens of thousands of pounds of beef a year. All right, and it's going to go up, and it's going to go up very fast. I may even start producing over 1 million pounds of beef, right, a year. I may even start doing that. If and this is the whole thing about it. If you require that rich people pay taxes, if there is a legitimate requirement for rich people to pay taxes, America will turn into a third world country overnight. Because how are we going to do that? How are the rich people going to do that? I don't have any income. I have assets. The reason that I generated so much money was because I created this business out of nothing. That's why my income is so high. That's why Elon Musk's income is so high. Not income. That's why the amount of money that Elon Musk is worth is so high. When people look at him and go, "Oh my God, he's got $410 billion. He's got $400 billion." He's not sitting there with $400 billion in his checking account. All right, he's got an equity stake in his company. Same with me. I don't have $7 million in my checking account. I have equity stake in my business, a 100% equity stake in my LLC, and my LLC produces about $400,000 a year, and I would reasonably anticipate that I grow my revenue pretty drastically, maybe even 250% by the end of the year. That's how I made my money. You cannot, this whole thing about, the way that I see it is that taxing people does not work. Taxing people does not work. The only thing that legitimately works, and I've already spoken about this, the whole idea, the most influential thing in terms of legitimately becoming like a rich person, the most influential thing that you can do is what? You can hang around rich people. That's it. All right, eventually you'll start to pick things up for yourself. If you hang around rich people, that is the most influential thing that you can do in terms of your financials. If you hang around poor people, you're going to end up poor. I guarantee it. I would be willing to bet 10 to 1. All right, and I've talked about this, like, if you're on YouTube, right, and you're looking around and, find rich people that whatever, find rich people and subscribe to rich people. I'm not saying subscribe to me. I don't care if you died, but, find rich people. All right. Subscribe to Warren Buffett. See what Warren Buffett has to say. All right. Find rich people. Find somebody in whatever aspect of the find them. They're all over the place. Sometimes you got people in business acquisition, you got people in commercial real estate, you got people in stocks, and you got people in all sorts of aspects of the company, or in all sorts of aspects of the economy. Surround yourself with rich people. See what they have to say. See how they live their lives. That is the most influential thing that you can do, because if you hang around poor people, you are going to start validating each other. And the next thing you know, you won't even notice that anything, you won't even realize that you're all just effectively just going down together. And I call that the moron megazord. Surround yourself with rich people. There are a lot of ways to get rich. There are a lot of ways. And after a certain point, the money doesn't even do anything. All right, there are many ways to get rich, and you only need one deal. Right, I talk about this in terms of a realistic perspective, in terms of making enough money to legitimately do anything on the planet. Granted that you're not an idiot. is about $15,000 a month. If you start bringing home about $15,000 a month, you can legitimately do anything except for be an idiot. Legitimately, you can do anything. You want to live on $10,000 a month and buy $5,000 worth of the S&P 500 every month, you can do that, and you will live completely comfortably. And you know, the equity stake in your S&P 500 will continue to accumulate over a long period of time. And you know, you can effectively do, you know, at about $15,000 a month, you only need one deal. If you only had one deal your entire life, that would effectively be enough money in terms of a realistic sense to make you enough money to not worry about money forever. Legitimately. And if you wanted to do better than that in the future, if you wanted to push yourself like me, I actually want to push myself. I actually want to do better for myself. All right, I'm just, because the whole thing about this is that, like, me sitting here collecting money, $400,000 a year is effectively enough money for me to do whatever the heck I want. Realistically, it's enough money to do whatever the heck I feel like. If I legitimately, if I wanted to go out and eat a Michelin star dinner every single day for the rest of my life, I could do it on 400 grand. I could just put some money in the S&P. I could put whatever, $5,000, $10,000 a month into the S&P 500, and I could just call it a day. All right, and I could legitimately just sit here and just never worry about money again. All right, but I don't, and I've even been talking about this. The whole thing about, like, me just sitting here collecting money is making me feel physically sick. I don't want to sit here and collect money. If I legitimately felt like farming like this for the rest of my life, on whatever, my 2 lease properties and, my 1 lease property and my 10.5 acre field, and I just felt like making 400 grand a year for the rest of my life, I can always come back and do that. This is not challenging for me at all. It's not difficult for me at all. It actually makes me feel physically sick. I would like to push myself. All right, I would like to see what, I would like to see, I would like to push myself. I really want to push myself. I want to push forward with this thing. I'm looking to push forward with this thing. But that's how I will do it. I will sell 15 animals and I will buy 20. When I buy the 20, I will split it up into 10 animals every month. If I split it up into 10 animals every month, effectively by the time I hit 60 animals, I will be selling 10 animals every month instead of 15 every 2 months. My income will have gone up, and along the way, I will, create a cash, I will be creating a cash pile, but I will be utilizing that cash pile to deleverage myself and just make sure that my growth targets are met. All right, I am looking to stably grow my business by 5% a month, every single month. All right, and I will do that. I will effectively ensure that that happens with the cash pile, and then the remaining money in the cash pile will go towards deleveraging myself. So that's the big idea. That's exactly what I am going to be doing. That is exactly what I will be doing. If anything changes, I will say so. And here's the thing, how do I believe that the numbers will pan out? If I sell 15 and I buy 20 and I buy 10 every month, I believe that I will effectively have about it'll be about 7, it'll be after I've paid for everything, right? I've grown my business by 5%. I've paid for everything that I needed. I paid out my dividend. After all of that, I believe that I will still have about $7,000 or $8,000 a month cash left over, okay? I will still probably have about $7,000 or $8,000 a month left over. And with that money, I can either continue to grow my business, which would lower my debt ratio, but I don't know if I will be able to precondition that many animals at the same time. All right, I don't know if I will be able to precondition that many animals at the same time. I'll have to see. Or I can just use the money to pay off my debt. I can do whatever I want. It'll be money. It'll just be money in my account, and I can figure out what I want to do with it. All right, but I believe that by the end of the year, I will end up with about 120 cattle, maybe 150. And the big goal for next year, is to run 1,000. That's my big goal for next year. If I position myself to have about 120, 150 cattle by the end of this year, I can get to 1,000 next year. I can get to 1,000. All right, and if I get to 1,000, I'm looking to go for 1,000. That's my big goal. All right, that's my big goal. I'm gonna get to 1,000. I really want to start running about 1,000 head of cattle. All right, I really want to start running about 1,000 head of cattle. That's where I want to go for. But that's my but that's my financial situation. I don't have an income, okay? I don't have an income. If you were to legitimately take a look at how much money I made in the last 2 years, if you were to legitimately take a look at that, you would have to consider the reality that I started this business by myself. I started this business out of nothing. This business legitimately did not exist until I started it. You would have to consider that, because that is, that's worth money. And I've already said that when it comes to money, I'm not concerned about money at all. 0%. Legitimately, I'm not concerned about it at all. I'm not concerned about it at all. I don't know how else to put it. Money does not concern me. Even if I had nothing, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. It doesn't matter. All right, money does not concern me at all. 0%. I don't know how, everything costs me nothing. All of this costs me nothing. Everything effectively costs me nothing. Imagine living in a world where everything costs you nothing. That's effectively my world. None of this costs me anything. If I legitimately, if I had to start over, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. I could redo it all in 30 seconds. It doesn't matter to me. And I could guarantee that I could turn $5,000 into $100,000 in less than 15 months. I would guarantee it. And I would do it by just starting myself a cattle business. I would 100% guarantee it. That's effectively the situation that I'm in. All right, my income for this year, income is an ambiguous thing. And my income is zero, okay? My income is zero. In terms of the amount of money that I generated, if we were to take a look at it through an objective lens, I would have made almost $7 million in the last 2 years. And that's honestly what more it feels like. Because I don't know how else to put it than to just say, I legitimately do not worry about money at all. I'm not concerned about it. My balance sheet is massively in the positive. I do very well for myself. All right, borderline. I would have made almost $7 million in the last 2 years. That's honestly what it is. And in all honesty, I will be more than doubling the size of my business by the end of the year. I would be willing to bet I will end up more than doubling the size of my business by the end of the year. If not by the end of the year, by about maybe, February or March of next year. And when my business starts to grow, it will grow very quickly. All right. I will be utilizing the capital to grow my business. All right. My business is going to grow very quickly. My net worth may even go over, I don't even know. But if we were to take a look at how much money I generated, if we were to legitimately take a look at it, I would have generated almost $7 million in the last 2 years. That's a very realistic way to look at it, because my income right now, in terms of if I were going to put a number on it, how much money do I make? It's probably about 400 grand. That's about how much money I make. And, and if we include the fact that I am still looking into growing this thing in the future, I will actually probably be more than doubling my revenue over the next 6 months. I will be more than doubling my revenue. If we include that, and then we take a multiple of my earnings, a reasonable multiple would be like 15 times. It would be like 15 times. And reasonably, and maybe I make a little bit more than 400 grand, but it's honestly about 7 million. That's about what we're talking about. My business is probably worth about 7 million. All right, and at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, and that's honestly more of what it feels like. Everything costs me nothing. I don't know how else to put this. Money's kind of an illusion. Money's kind of like this Fugazi magic trick. Everything costs me nothing. Everything legitimately costs me nothing. Money's kind of an illusion. Once you understand that you can use money to make money, everything just kind of becomes like a smoke and mirrors magic trick. Everything costs me nothing. All of this costs me absolutely nothing. All of this makes me money. If I stopped doing this, I would hemorrhage money. I don't, just to, give you, my perception of how I see things. Everything costs me nothing. Even if I had nothing, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. All right, it is what it is. I mean, and if we were to take a look at the number, like if we were to just flat out objectively take a look at the number, I would have probably generated myself, it would be almost $7 million in the last 2 years. It would be almost $7 million. All right, and that number is going up very quickly. I would reasonably anticipate, and just to put things in perspective, I will go over $80,000 a month in the next 6 months. I will go over 80,000. I'm already at about 40,000. I'm already at about 35, 40,000. I will go over 80,000 in the next 6 months. And when I go over 80,000 and I take the same multiple, my net worth will just about have doubled as well. My net worth would be somewhere around $15 million. And I will do that within the next 6 months. If anything happens that causes it to change, I will say so. But that's the big idea. Sell 15, buy 20, create a cash portfolio. Utilize the cash portfolio to pay out the dividend. Ensure that, the objectives are met. The growth objectives are met. And once that has happened, with the remaining capital, I can do whatever it is that I feel like doing with it. I can either expand my business more, I can buy more cattle, or I can pay off my debt. Whatever I believe is the better thing to do, I will do it. Sell 15, buy 20. That's the big idea. That will leave me with money. And then, if I do that, effectively by the end of the year, I will have about 60 cattle, and I will, within the next 3 or 4 months, I will effectively have 60 cattle, and I will have borderline zero debt on my balance sheet. All right. And, and then if I do that, if I get to about 120 cattle by the end of the year, that puts me in a very good position to push myself past, to push myself for that 1,000 next year. That puts me in a very good position for that 1,000 next year. All right. All right, that, I'm looking to really, I really want to run about 1,000 head of cattle. All right. I really want to run about 1,000 head of cattle. That's the big idea. All right. And at the end of the day, right, I've always said money's not an opinion. All right. If you got a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, you should probably keep it to yourself. All right. Because, you're legitimately probably borderline homeless. I guarantee it. And it's borderline pathetic. All right, when, I legitimately show you how I do this in real life. I'm a very realistic example of what it looks like. I make enough money to not worry about money. I am not concerned about money at all, 0%. Even if I had nothing, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. I'm not concerned about money at all. 0%. I don't know exactly how much. If I were to legitimately take a look at how much money I make, how much money I create, how much money I make, I would have made almost $7 million in the last 2 years. And that number will double in the next 6 months. I don't worry about money at all, 0%. I'm not concerned about it. Even if I had nothing, I could redo it all in 30 seconds. I'm not concerned about money at all. All right, legitimately 0%. I don't know how else to put it. That's how much money I make. Everything costs me nothing. That's how much money I make. All right, everything is effectively, it doesn't cost me anything. That's more of a realistic idea of how much money I make. All right.